welcome in. We'll get started in just a second. Okay, looks like we've got some folks in here. So, welcome to Conversations That Matter. We have a couple of great guests tonight. We have Bob Browning and Buttons McKinney. And if you have any questions or comments, definitely use that chat. We want to hear from you. We want to involve you in this conversation this evening. So that's enough for me. I'll throw it over to Michelle Treece and Brittany Butler.
Good evening, folks.
Hello. I hope y'all are loving this darkness that is everywhere. But we have some great guests with us tonight. I'm Brittany, and I'm Michelle.
I'm Michelle.
We'll get this switched over.
Glad you guys are still awake and not in bed because it's dark. So we have our guest tonight, and we're going to ask Buttons to introduce himself first.
Ernest L Jr., better known as Buttons, was born in Jonesboro, raised in Jonesboro, born in Alabama. Just now getting back to Jonesboro full time.
Great. And how about you, Bob? Who are you?
I'm Bob Browning. I moved into the Jonesboro area in '77, started working for the town of Jonesboro in 1978, and moved into town in '79. I built a house that's off of East Main Street in Scott Lane, so I've been here for 40-some years, I guess. I am the has-been town administrator of Jonesboro for many years, and have a deep passion for the town and the people of Jonesboro.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Buttons, how did you get this nickname?
My mother gave it to me, and I just tell people to, ask her, but I think it was to keep from calling me Junior, even though I am a junior. So it stuck, and that's me.
Yeah. That's great. Bob, did you ever have a nickname?
No, not really. I have friends that call me Bobby, but
Okay.
I was mostly, my parents called me Bobby, and I have a few close friends that call me Little Bobby, but
That's great.
I think I was called Bullwinkle a couple of times, I guess. Bullwinkle Moose. I'm not exactly sure why. but anyway, there's a couple people that call me Bullwinkle for a while. I always wondered about Button's brother Kevin. He was called Rat.
Rat,
yeah.
Rat.
He told me one time. I can't remember why he called
It
Rat.
started out as Mouse. They tried to make it Buttons and Bows, but Bows didn't stick. So somehow I think a cousin of ours would call him Mouse. And then as he grew, he became Rat. Then when he went to college, he became Mr. Rat.
That's great. That is great.
Yeah, so it works. My nephew or my son-in-law calls him Dr. Rat. So, but he's a character, though. My brother's a character, no doubt about it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So both of you were born in other places, right? And then Bob, where were you born?
I was born technically in DC. My father worked for the Department of Agriculture, and I lived in Arlington, but it was George Washington Hospital in the district where I was born. But they took me home to Virginia, I guess, on the other side of the river. So I grew up in Arlington, Virginia.
Okay. And then you were born?
I was born in Florence, Alabama. My dad taught school there, and I was born there, but I think I was back in Jonesboro before I turned 1, basically, because he got the job at Booker T. Washington as the principal there. So we came back to Jonesboro. My mom's from Jonesboro. My dad is originally from South Carolina, and they moved to Johnson City.
You may want to tell folks who your dad is.
Oh,
They may not know.
my bad, yeah. My dad is Ernest McKinney Sr., who was the first Black alderman elected in Jonesboro. My brother, Mr. Rat, no, Kevin, he was the first Black mayor of Jonesboro. He was elected to the board of mayor and alderman. And I think the mayor resigned for some reason. I can't think of what went on.
It was, actually from 1978, Ernest had been elected to the board of mayor and alderman in 1968. He ran for mayor in 1976 against Lyle Halls, and interestingly, Grace Halls, his wife, ran against her husband.
Wow.
And Ernest, and they sort of split the votes, and Grace won. But he ran for alderman again in 1978, and he was on the board for 6 years during the administration that Jimmy Neal Smith was the mayor. And that's when that board was instrumental in moving Jonesboro sort of into the current century, because they developed the recreation program, the tourism program, solved the water problems that they were under moratorium with both water and sewer, got grants. They totally changed the direction of the town, and Ernest was he was the common sense guy on the Lord blessed his dad with the extra punch of common sense, because he was great and stabilized the board. And it was really a lot of turmoil, because Jimmy Neal had a lot of opposition during that time, people who did some really mean things, and Jimmy Neal was one of these people who couldn't hurt a fly, would not want to walk on the grass if it's and this kind of thing. But he just generated some people that it's almost something like what's going on now, on the national level, that were just got obsessed with trying to do something to him in some way or another. So it was an interesting time period. But during that time, the board just was really cohesive, and Ernest was just a great alderman for the town. And when he didn't run again, Kevin ran. And so there was a McKinney on the town board, and Kevin was on for 12 years. And so, you had 18 years in a row of a McKinney on the board of mayor and alderman. And that's when that's when most of the good stuff happened.
Wow. So was your dad one of the first Black person on Jonesboro's alderman? And
yeah, he was the first. Even though Reverend Gentry Fitzgerald had ran earlier. He was the minister at the time at the Bethel Christian Church, and he ran maybe back in the 60s, I think, but was never elected. But my dad came along and he was elected to that position. It was real interesting, to campaign as a younger person for him with my peers, and it's like, here, take this, tell your parents, to come out and vote. So it kind of worked out. It was a pretty good coalition of people. Alfred Greenlee was probably, he and Alfred were really good friends, and it's like they said, he knows where all the bodies are buried. I worked for him a couple of summers. And I used to wonder why my parents would get me jobs during the summer. I mean, you come home on vacation, you think, oh yeah, you need to go see so-and-so tomorrow. Well, I just got here today, and I worked for Alfred, Department of Water and Sewer, drove the trash truck, knew the route. Mud holes, trying to fix a line or doing whatever, and I think it was to show me you need to get education or you'll be doing this. There's nothing wrong with this. Don't get me wrong, because I work with a lot of folks doing different things, you know, pouring concrete, roofing houses, stuff like that. And I think they got me those jobs. It's like, okay, if you don't finish, then this may be what you're doing. So I was a pretty quick learner on that, you know. But it's like Bob said too, my dad was a common sense person. It was like, you know, make it make sense to do what you're gonna do. I can remember he was not as lenient as I was as a parent, but he would let you speak your piece, but the answer was still whatever he said it was gonna be, you know?
Sounds like me.
You know, and so you got that, you know, but at least you saw where he was coming from. He knew where you were coming from, but you know, if he'd already said it, then it was over with. I just think he allowed us to speak our piece. And, okay, that's it, but the answer's still what I said it was, you know. And I learned one thing also, and it helps down the line about parenting. You know, if you ask one of them and they don't give you the right answer, then you can't go to the other one, because they will know that. You know, and I got caught up into that as a parent. You know, my children call, oh, Daddy, we're doing so and so and so and so. Well, okay, go ahead. Brenda, you know, the children have this, and it's like, I told them. And I was like, oh, they sucked me in on that one, you know. But the next time they called me, I was like, okay, hold on just a second. Let me get your mom. I didn't tell them I was getting their mom on the line, but I was like, let me, you know, three-way this. Okay, now ask that question again, you know. Because I was just easy going, oh yeah, go ahead. But I didn't know that they had asked her first and she said no. You know, but I learned that from my parents, because, you know, you ask them and they give you the answer, and then you go to the other one and it's like, well, what'd your mom say, or what'd your dad say? Okay, they said no, so I guess I need to keep moving. Still no. You know, and that helped in, you know, in your development, because for me, it kind of helped build character, and you understood, okay, this may not be the question to ask my mom. I'll go to my dad first, or this may not be the question to ask Fess, so I'm going to my mom first, you know, and you kind of pick that off. But then it was like, okay, what did they say? Did they not say this or that or the other? You know, so we never got to play them against each other. Just wasn't going, you know.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. We're parents too right here, and hear that. I see it.
I think one of the things that, you know, because Ernest was such a strong voice in the leadership, and you know, he was always, you know, one of the top vote getters the years that he ran. And with Kevin coming in right behind him was more or less the same thing. And as Button said, the mayor resigned, and I was trying to think who that was at that point when Kevin was appointed.
Yeah, I can't
mayor, and so he was. Of course, the mayor runs every 2 years, so it's like that. He was mayor for 9 years, but he was on the board and had been on the board for a year and a half. Let me think about that. No, he'd been on the board for a year and a half, and then the mayor resigned, and he got, I think maybe it was Tommy Dillo resigned. I think that's who resigned, and then they appointed Kevin within the board itself, you know, for that year, and then he ran again 4 more times, you know, for mayor, and you know, they you know, other than Ernest running for mayor back in 76, you know, he never lost, neither one of them lost an election after that. And I think I mentioned the last time that, you know, when Ernest came on the board in 1978, there's been an African American on the board of mayor and alderman for 40 4 years in a row, and Adam Dixon has 2 more years, so it'll be 46 years in a row that there's been a minority presence on it. And I think that, it speaks for the quality of the candidates themselves, the people, but it also says something about that. I think there's people, and I have always felt like people in Jonesboro understood the importance of having diversity and having, input from your entire community.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know, like, knowing that there's always been a minority person on some type of the city council type for that long. But then you look at the school situation, and have there been any African Americans on their school board?
Well, my dad was on the school
Yeah.
board.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was chairman.
Chairman,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
I think
Perfect.
after, I guess it was probably during the same time Kevin was the mayor.
Yeah,
Maybe
he ran for school board and got elected.
Got elected,
And I'd say he was on there for a number of years, probably 8 years or so.
I think so,
something like that.
yeah.
And,
That's great. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he, like you were talking about the meeting in Nashville,
Mhm.
I took him to DC. They had some type of
Oh, the national.
national,
Yeah.
and we have a picture with John Tanner, who was representative in West Tennessee, and we went to visit him. And I've got a picture of quite a few, I think, of the school board members from Washington County went.
Mhm.
So education was really his thing, and it was kind of, it was tough for me to watch him in his later years with Alzheimer's and things like that, because I can remember calling him and a word would come up, and of course they were always, well, go look it up in the dictionary, and I'm like, well, I'm the world's worst speller. So I would call him sometimes, what does this word mean? And he would, right off the top of his head, oh yeah, this means so and so. I remember one time in particular when they retired Jackie Robinson's number 42 into perpetuity. Maybe get my dictionary, and I'm like, how do you spell perpetuity? So I just called him. I was like, hey, what's this mean? It means forever.
Yeah.
Now tell me how to spell it, and I'll look it up in the dictionary. Not that I'm not taking your word for it, but
Yeah.
I can find it, but I just didn't know how to spell it. But then after his Alzheimer's kind of started, coming in, and he wasn't really upset with it as most people usually get, because he was cool with it. You wouldn't know it until he asked you that question again, or maybe again, but just meeting him and just conversation, you would never know it, and I remember his doctor saying that, he was surprised that he wasn't aggravated with the situation, because I could see that, it's like I said, he taught English, he taught business, he was an assistant principal.
Wow.
Well, he was principal at Langston. Mr. Reed died in 1961, so he took over the principalship during that year, and he was principal there until they hired another principal, but he went on and got the degrees and things that he needed to move on up the ladder, on that part. So he was always encouraging, and it's funny because we really never called him daddy or dad or father. It was always Fess. And the reason we did it was because of all the students that he had taught along the way, Professor McKinney, or it was always, Professor McKinney, or this, that, and the other. So we just shortened it to Fess and kept moving. But yeah, and it's like Bob said, people within this community, the Johnson City community, probably half of the state of Tennessee knew him, knew him because he was on boards and different things. And the other day I found a formal invitation from President Clinton, inaugural. You know, that's the first time I'd ever seen it. I was just cleaning out some stuff, and I was like, saw his name on it. I was like, what is this? And it looked like it was official. I was like, oh, okay, you know, but he knew a lot of people. I mean, through education, through traveling, different things. He knew quite a few people.
There is a good reason that the McKinney Center is named after the McKinney family, and it's, you know, marry him too. And I can tell you, if Buttons had been here, it'd been the same with him. And he's here now, and he's already got a presence, you know, in town. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the board of Mayor Allen.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Have you had a desire to go into politics?
I'll move past that.
He didn't even pause to think.
No, and I'm only kidding, but I tell people when I was in Nashville, oh man, you ought to run for office. You know, I was like, look, man, I got skeletons in my closet. Some of them have meat on the bone, so we'll just leave that alone. You know? But I've always been interested in politics, but I just, with the way the hassle is now, you know, I just don't need all of that. But I do like being involved. I gotten back into going to Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting when I can remember it, you know, but just want to see the town continue to progress, because like you said, I think during Fes's time and Kev's time, you know, the storytelling, the whole nine. Jimmy Neal, I think he set up a lot of things, and Fess was on the board then, so it just kind of moved like it should have.
It set the direction for the town, and you know, and really established the foundation for the progress that Jonesborough has made over, you know, really a 40-year period of time since then, or almost, I guess it's been close to that. And you know, it's you know, the town has been really fortunate to have really good people, you know, on the board, and have a progressive board that has not only established a vision, but has had enough continuity to carry that vision out, you know, over a fairly long period of time. And if you look at when Buttons was working for the town of Jonesborough, the town hall was where the corner cup is now, and the whole fleet of you know, which was a garbage truck and a backhoe and, you know, a couple of trucks and 2 police cars, you know, parked behind in that little parking lot behind the corner cup. And you know, and it's so different from the way that the water system, when I started working for the town, the water system had you know, they rate water systems. You know, our water system has a 99 rating, which is you know, has always been, in the last decade or so, has been as good as Johnson City. And it was, and that whole survey that you go through, and the evaluation and inspection, you know, because you have state comes in and that you have all these different criteria. It is 4 times as difficult to get that 99 rating as it was back when I first started for the town, and we had a 47 rating, and we deserved it. And we had a 9-year-old water plant that could produce enough water for the system, you know, and you know, that, and you know, had this debt service that, and we had to build a whole new treatment plant. It wasn't expandable and things like that. So the whole issue of long range planning and you know, the culture changed pretty dramatically, and it was, you know, it started in the administration that Ernest was part of, and the budget during that time period was 2 pages. 2 pages. And you know, if you look at the budget document now, you know, it's like this, and it changed. All that changed during the administration that Ernest and Jimmy Neal and Toby Bledsoe, Sam May were the 4 people that were. There's aldermen, there was changes in aldermen every year, but not those four. And they were the ones that meant everybody worked together, that, you know, even the fifth alderman, but those four provided that continuity. And they came in and developed a long range plan of goals and worked hard to achieve those goals. And the people of Jonesborough responded very positively to that. Now, that's the other thing, that the stuff that administration started had a tremendous amount of support from the community, which was, and that was during time periods when, in 79, when interest rates were like 15, 17% and stuff like that. And people said, oh, you can't do anything, you know, but they did. And, you know, grants and every kind of way to get something done,
Yeah.
you know, with using creativity.
Wow.
It's
So-
a great time.
When your family was running for office, you were saying, like, I guess that's probably early 60s.
Yeah, my dad
How-
is 68, yeah.
I know that was in the middle of civil rights and all of that. How did those two areas kind of merge with your family? Like, did he get a lot of support? Did he get some backlash
He
from
did,
folks that were
did
like,
get some backlash, but he got support. I know the first time he came up short, but I think as people got to know him, and it's like Bob said, with the common sense approach to different things, that I think they looked beyond what they saw to what the status and the situation was, and how they worked through those things, you know, without a whole lot of hurrah and different things like that. It was just, you know, keep your nose to the grindstone, make it work, and it worked. And I think people really accepted that.
You know, I came in and like I said, it was in the area, started working for the town in January of 78. And at that time, the elections were in April, and it was just a city election. And there was nothing in there was a lot in regards to, you know, people trying to say something negative about Jimmy Neal, but the other people running in Ernest, you know, there was never any kind of, you know, I never heard anything in the community of, you know, well, you know, he's black and, you know, why's he running and this kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, when he was elected in 68, that election was on a Thursday, and that was the same. He won his election the same night that Martin Luther King was killed in Memphis.
wow.
Yeah, it kind of put a damper on the celebration, but yeah, it was something else. It really was, you know, the celebration, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, what do we do? But it worked well, and he just kept pushing. I mean, that was my dad and my mom. I don't want to slight either one of them. They were a good couple. I mean, you know, and I have the wherewithal, the hindsight of 2020, because I remember both of my grandparents on both sides. My grandmother, my dad's father, I remember him, my great grandfather. And they all seemed to be going somewhere, even though that side of the family was from South Carolina. My grandfather moved them to Johnson City for a better life. And my grandmother, Kari, education was always in her wheelhouse, and 9 children. You can go to college if you want to. There was, you know, nothing. If you want to go, you can go.
Yeah.
Some of them went, some of them didn't, but everybody had the opportunity. And I could see from them, and even my mom's people who were here in Jonesboro, they were into education as well. So you really didn't you got common denominators from both sides, and education was it, and you're going to church unless you're dead. And I found that out, being a teenager. Okay, you come in here at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning if you want to, but you going to church Sunday morning. I don't care. And like I said, as my dad used to say, are you dying? Well, I guess I'm going to church. And this was even in his later years. I remember I would come in, and I remember one morning in particular, because he's going to church, bottom line in the story. So a couple of times I was up here and he didn't go. So I'm like, oh, okay. So this one morning I heard him, and I was like, well, maybe he's just up, maybe he's not going to church. So I just kind of pulled the covers over my head. So he's like, you going to church today? I guess I am, yeah. And I'm what? 50-something,
Great.
Yep, you're going to church. A lot of times he would call me when I lived in Nashville, especially on Sundays. You go to church today? Yes, we went to church. You go to church today? Yes, we went to church. And when Kev moved to Nashville, we would find a church that had a service at 7 o'clock in the morning. And we would be there with our golf clubs in the trunk of the car. We're going to play golf, but yes, we did go to church. So, it was kind of, it took me a while, because if you didn't go to church, you didn't go anywhere that week. So even out on my own, sometimes if I didn't go to church, it's like, well, I guess I need to sit in the house all day. Like, I didn't go to church, or I can't go anywhere but to work, that kind of had that effect on me,
Yeah.
But we always went to church, we always went to school. It was a funny story about Kev. One day he got up, and this was back during the Afro time. So, you get your hair plaited, and then you pick it out. So this one day, Kev was just determined he wasn't going to take the hair down.
Yeah.
So he said, well, I guess I just won't go to school. So I just immediately left the room. I was like, because you're not going to win this one.
Right.
And I guarantee you're going to school and you will not have plaques, but Kev was one of those guys that, okay, the stove is hot. Well, I don't believe it, So, but that day, Fest 1, which he usually did, he went to school, hair down. So, and I was like, I could have told you this, but I understand you got to see it, because some things you just picked up. And it's like I said, if you go back to your grandparents and you look at it, it's like, okay, that's why my parents are like they are. And you understood them because you either stayed with one set or the other. Didn't matter. It just depended on who was available, but there were always cousins. So you were going to do that, and you could pick up off of what they did, and you could see, or I could see how my parents turned out like they were, because their parents were of a certain, you had to do things, or you did things and certain things, and I can remember even my grandfather here in Jonesborough, church again. Oh, it snowed. It ain't that far. And we were walking off of Lincoln Avenue to Bethel on Depot Street, and we had walked to church. I mean, in the snow.
Wow.
They were having church, you went.
There you go.
My grandfather, I can remember him firing up the warm morning, You go ahead and turn on the heat. You actually built a fire in a potbelly stove, It's just something, just something to do. But, when you look back on it, it's like people say, it won't kill you, but it'll make you stronger. What doesn't kill you will make you stronger. So we had a good work ethic. We had a good going to school ethic. It's almost like the Bill Cosby thing, where I don't feel good today, and then school's out. Oh, guess what? An angel came in and said, go out and play. You didn't go to school today, so you can't go out and play. So you just, you know, so
Sit there and
that
read.
was a no-no, you know, you couldn't go in it, well, fake it. Plus our mother was a nurse, so you couldn't fake it. So,
And I tell you what, when you talk about Marion, I don't know if you two know Marion, but you know, when you talk about strong will and
right.
you know, willing to express your opinion,
Oh
you know, he's come from a family culture that is gonna be successful. I mean, I tell you what, both of his parents. Marion is somebody you want on your side.
Yes.
She is truly a wonderful person. But if she thinks you've done something wrong, she's going to tell you.
right.
And you know, fortunately, I've worked hard to be on her good side.
Yeah, that's it. That's what
That's
side
great.
you want to be on. Yeah.
Now, Bob, did you say you built your house here in Jonesboro?
I did a lot of work on it. The answer is we built a house in Jonesboro. If you're asking if I built it, then I would have to say that I built a lot of it, and I wasn't intending to do that. I had a contractor who did chalet houses up in the mountains and stuff like that, and so I got my house framed up and everything, and then he went bankrupt on another job, and I would work for the town of Jonesborough during the day and then come back and work till 11 or 12 o'clock, you know, and when my wife and I moved in, we had a young child and a baby. And so we ate dinner in the bathroom because that was where we had some heat and we could sit down on the commode. And so the rest of it was just framed up. And I did have outside hemlock on the walls, and it had a roof on it. But I finished all the inside of it, did a lot of rock work, and there's some. And I did all the electrical and plumbing in it.
That's
So
pretty
I
cool.
guess in some way,
Something that counts.
it counts for something. I don't. It still makes me tired to think about it. I don't. It's not something I ever want to do again.
How was church for you growing up?
I grew up a Southern Baptist, but it was a Baptist church that was in Arlington, and it had a really large. It was actually in Falls Church, which our house was on the Arlington and Falls Church, and some of those early Virginia communities that were a little strange because, like, Falls Church is a city, but it's not in a county, and Arlington is a county that has no city, and so and so you have that kind of relationship. So the county and city line went through our house actually, and our backyard was in Falls Church and our front yard was in Arlington, and we were the last house on Fairfax Drive. And if you went up further, the next house was 303 Lincoln Avenue in Falls Church. But the church was actually in Falls Church, but it was a large. It was Columbia Baptist Church, and it was a large church, and it had a diverse, a population in it, and my mother was a deacon, and a lot of the Baptist church, especially way back then, if you were a woman, how could you possibly know how to run anything? And so it was different. And when the Baptist Church, Southern Baptist, really got into to politics and stuff like that, I guess that was maybe in the 70s or 80s, I guess. And they even, I don't know whether they ultimately withdrew from the Southern Convention or not, but they had a Korean service and stuff like that, and it's really a large church, and the ministers that were hired to be there were not what you would perceive as a typical Baptist church. So when I came into Jonesboro, when I was in school in Nashville, I went to a Methodist church there, but when I came into Jonesborough, my wife and I went to different churches, and the Presbyterian church was the only one in town that was integrated. There was a Presbyterian church, I think, in a congregation, black congregation that was in Nashville, where the church went out, and the Jonesboro Presbyterian Church, asked him. And so Otis Peeler was he was the church clerk and stuff like that, and there were people. I don't know if you remember A.G. Howard and the Howard family that lived down there on Spring Street.
Right.
You had Lester and Clarence and John
and
A.Z. older than Zeno Howard.
Right.
And who was just somebody that I adored, and he was in the Presbyterian church, and he ran a Sunday school class that I was part of. But that that congregation was it was really important to us, and important to our kids and stuff like that, and it was that was one of the opportunities, I guess, besides meeting people like Ernest when I moved into town, but it was they were just wonderful families, and Pauline Douglas and Charles and their family and stuff, it was just wonderful people, and I view that as being blessed to be part of that. AZ was just funny. He was so prim and proper.
Right.
And I think I told you, Michelle, that it was always so funny because he wore a bow tie, and he could sing. He would sing "Eyes on the Sparrow." He'd sing spiritual songs and stuff like that, and he had a really great voice, and he ended up being a psychologist or something in Chicago for a number of for most of his life, and he retired and came back home, and he was so funny. But we've sat it with each other in choir, and I couldn't, he would, we'd just be sitting there, and the preacher would be talking, he'd just lean over. He didn't really say it like this, but he said, "I'm gonna kick your butt." And he used another 3-letter word, but it was just funny. It was just funny, and I had the best time being a friend with him. We'd go over, and his brother Clarence was so different than AZ was, and Clarence was funny, and we'd sit around the table in his house, and he'd invite me over at Christmas time because he made this really good eggnog that was like 180 proof. We'd sit around the table, drinking eggnog, and Clarence and I would make fun of AZ, and he would get so flustered and stuff. He was just a funny guy. I really miss him.
Yeah,
that's good. Just that Howard family was just, they were an icon on Spring Street.
They really were,
Yeah.
John was our barber back in the day. You couldn't go to other shops.
Right.
He cut hair out of his house. And so you just showed up. Any day you showed up, even on Sunday. Now the thing about Sunday, if the ball game was on, he tell you, look, we're watching the game, so you had to sit and watch the game if you're gonna get a haircut, or you came back the next day. Most of the time, if you were there to get a haircut, you sat and watched the game. Because you had to get a haircut,
Can't come back.
And he really taught us how to cut hair. Because as we grew, well, Sandy Johnson, we were real good friends, and we learned to cut each other's hair. I mean, we'd go up, and John D, sometimes he'd look at us, all right, you cut his hair, I'll fix it.
Sandy was a guy, by the way.
Yeah, he's a guy.
He was a little bit further down on Spring Street.
Right, yeah, it was, so that's how we learned to cut hair, you know, but nobody bothered him. He didn't have a license.
Yeah.
But that's what we did back in the day, and nobody said anything. You know, it was either Sunday, I'm watching the game, or I've been drinking, so come back later. You know,
You don't want me today.
it's like, okay, we'll do that. I mean, it was just that simple. And some days if you went there and Miss Buhner was cooking, you got a haircut and a meal. You know, because they always had something going on. I mean, there was something in the pot all the time. You know, it was just, it's just kind of how you operated. It's like you said, the Howard family, they were real good people, really good people.
Excellent, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
John lived behind AZ at the I'm not sure how far back that occurred, but he, if I remember correctly, I mean, he was a coal miner he had black lung.
Right, yeah.
And that was one of the things that he struggled with.
Yeah, he did. I worked with him at the hospital. He lived right beside Booker T. Washington, really, like you come out the back door. I think you can still see the house, but there was a path, you know, because that's what we did, you know, the kids would go and he would build onto his house, you know, he would do his own thing. I helped him when I was saying about roofing, I helped him roof a house one day and I knew that was something I did not want to do. But I was there helping because he's like, okay, we're doing this. Okay,
We did.
okay. You know, it's like, can we hurry up? Because it's getting hot. But you know, you started out usually first light. Because when the sun got up and you were on that asphalt, that is not fun.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Not fun at all. But yeah, it's a lot of wonderful families that I think of when we grew up here and how things progressed. Really, I say East Tennessee, Jonesboro especially, but East Tennessee, I guess in particular, it was different because people helped each other. They didn't look to nitpick you or this, that, or the other. And we got along
It wasn't
with it.
color based. It was
Right, it really was.
just, you know, you're part of the community. And Jonesboro's, you know, I mean, there's the population, you know, the African American population has always been sort of spread out. Your neighbor would be, you know, whiteness. And Alfred Greenlee talked about that in the, you know, and no, if either one of you saw the first community play that we did, where we purposely collected from the town of Jonesboro, sort of sponsored this, and we wanted to collect stories from the African American community in particular, because a lot of those stories were just going to be lost. I mean, you had people who had this, you know, Alfred Greenlee had this wealth of information, you know, just, you know, for years, you know, was instrumental in being involved in the town and how the town grew and this kind of thing. And we were struggling in the late 70s because of all the big box retailers and stuff. You know, Jonesboro was changing. We had a lot of vacant stores and stuff like that. And so, but we were looking at ways in which we could use the storytelling itself, you know, was getting really identified with Jonesboro on a national level. And we were getting a lot of publicity, you know, because of the story telling center and the storytelling festival in particular. But, you know, we also sort of in listening and talking about story, I think we had an understanding that collecting somebody, it's hard to hate somebody when you know their story. And you know, we felt like, you know, what we needed to do was to collect stories, and then Community Performance International that Jules was working for at the time were doing these. They were taking these stories and putting them into community performances, in which, you know, even people who were telling the stories could be involved in it, but they might not be telling their own story. I mean, they might not be performing their own story, but, you know, they were often involved in it, and they were being really successful with these. They were going in on an economic development initiative, you know, because you can inculcate with Georgia. 30 years ago, that was the first place that Community Performance International went into, and they've been doing plays for 30 years in a row, and it became the folk theater of Georgia. And people would come in, you know, to see these community plays, and they call them swamp gravy. And so, you know, we were, you know, Jimmy Neal in particular, you know, was aware that this was going on. And when we talked to CPI about coming into Jonesboro, it was really on the basis of not so much economic development, which we knew was a possibility, but we wanted to collect the stories in our community and tell those stories, because we believe that doing that, you know, help community building and relationship building and things like that. And it was, even though that's what we wanted to do, it was more impactful than we imagined. You know, people like Paul Braxton and Johnny Rousseau and people like that, you know, it's one of the things I miss is Johnny's not involved in elections anymore.
Right.
I would want to go in and vote on election day just because I wanted to go give him a hug. He's just a wonderful human being, and we got to know each other. And Alfred Greenlee's story and stories in that time period, you know, there's a great integration story that he did, and I don't know if I don't have to go into that. I don't know if you're aware of that. I know Sky is tuned into that, but it's really a powerful story. And a lot of us, you know, we were not involved in that particular performance. I was in the first session, the first performance, and you know, we had tears every time we practiced. You know, it was just so impactful. And as you know by now from the last session I was in, you know, I'm kind of sentimental about stuff, and to a fault. But you know, Alfred was just really, you know, collecting those stories, and we did in the collection process. We did story circles and brought you know, some groups. We had like James Scott and Chucky Pace and you know, and there's a number of different people that were, you know, that participated in that. And one of the interesting things about it, if I can carry on with this a little bit, and this is just, you know, this is what I heard them say, and Alfred in his story, you know, sort of confirmed that. Alfred wasn't in that story circle, but people like James Scott and all that said, you know, they didn't know anything about segregation, you know, until they got school age, because they played, you know, with the you know, we slept next door, we played with the kids next door. You know, we would, even after they had to go to Booker T or to Langston, you know, they would come home and sneak in the gym, you know, and the kids just played together. Why you like it didn't make any difference, and you stayed over at other people's house, and it didn't matter. And so Alfred's story was, and actually I'll go back to that story circle, and they were talking about that when they actually integrated in Jonesborough. It said, you know, it was no issue, because, you know, we went to school with our friends. You know, it was not, you know, it was like, you know, it's about time you're here kind of thing, you know, right. And that, you know, in terms of the response, at least that's what they said. And they said they had a harder time going to Langston than they did going into the, you know, when they integrated the school. And that was because they said the Johnson City kids sort of looked at them as country bumpkins and stuff like that, you know. And I can remember James Scott saying, you know, we just laughed at him because we knew a hell of a lot more than they did. You know, we're down here in Jonesboro getting our hands dirty and, you know, and doing all this stuff and, you know, working and all that. You know, we had, Montreal Brown made the comment. I think he was maybe the first, I think African-American that was hired by Eastman or something like that. And he said, if they knew you were from Jonesboro, you didn't have any trouble getting a job up there because they knew you were smart. To do the work and this kind of stuff. And so, but some, some of them, I think maybe it's Montreal before he got into Jonesboro, I think he said he walked, I don't know how many miles, he was way out off the bench.
Yeah, I think we're out in Boone's Creek.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And he had worked 4 or 5 miles to school every day, to get to Booker T and this kind of stuff. And so, and we just, part of what we were doing with the McKinney Center was taking a building that was used to separate people and to unite people and and that's a program that Sky and Jules in particular are we're really proud of what they're doing, and you're also involved in the McKinney Center as well. I think it's really important.
And was that we did it together?
That was I Am Home,
Oh, okay.
which was
That was the first community
version.
play,
Oh, okay.
and Alfred Greenlee's story
I see.
was part of that, and he actually brought us in '62. I think that the schools were integrated in '64, but in '62. Can I just quickly tell this story? I'll shorten it a little bit, but it's really powerful because he was talking about his mother and how she fed the hobos that would come in on the train because their house on Depot Street was really close, and that she was this really powerful person in his life. But when he asked when he was a kid, why can't I go to school with my friends, she just said it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is, and he never could understand that. And then when he had a son that grew up and asked him the same question, why can't I go to school with my friends? And he said, well, get your clothes on, we're going to go find out. And he took his son over to it said the principal, but it could have, he said the principal, and it could have been the principal because I think, I'm not sure who it was at the time. That didn't become part of the story. But anyway, he went over and said, my son wants to know why he can't go to school with his friends. And then he said, his nickname was Ack. And he said, well, Ack, we just thought that, they'd want to go to school with, who they go to church with and stuff like that. And he says, well, no, that's not what they want. And want to go to school with his friends. And so he goes, well, okay, well, let's put him in the class. So they immediately took him over and put him in class. And Alfred came back and told him, and he went to start going to class there. It's 2 years before they integrated. And Alfred said, I came back and I told him, I said, if my son causes trouble, I want you to take your belt out and whip him. But if he comes home and he tells me that he didn't do anything and he got whipped, I'll be back. And then in the end of the vignette, it was Johnny Rousseau who's playing Alfred. And he's walking down this ramp and he turns around and he said, I never went back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
It is a great story.
I wonder, are these stories written down?
They are now because all of the stories were translated.
Yeah.
Not translated. They were just
Transcribed.
typed and documented. And so Jules has this big book of we collected. They're not, as I understand it, unless something's changed, they're not readily available to people unless you come in, I guess. But they're not digitized, are they?
some are.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'd have to ask them about that.
But I think that's something, that we have some, Jules and I have just recently been having some discussions about things that just because I'm really invested in and feel so strongly about the program. And there's things that we can do better. People don't understand how important it is, even within our own community. They don't understand the value, and they don't, if they go to these plays, they're just impactful, and especially when you do the I remember thing at the end,
Right.
and you're remembering people in the past, and you know, I'm an advocate of even doing a more formal, I remember, and remembering people in your own community, black, white, or whatever, that, you know, have had an impact on your community. And I think it's something that, you know, that we should do continually, to look back at those people who have had a really positive impact, you know, on the town.
I think about the great-great-grandchildren of the kids who walked in and the dad said, if he does something, it's fine. Those great-great-grandkids and the descendants of those kids, they need to hear this.
Yeah.
I don't know where they are, but they need to hear that.
And that was one thing that never really, going to Dunbar, I didn't go to Booker T, I went to Dunbar, but the teachers, the situations were so impactful, but I never really thought about why we were segregated.
Right.
Because Lincoln Avenue, Larry and Gary Crawford, I guess they were the first two guys I can remember. They came up, we played, I went down to his place, played the Overmans.
Are these black families, white families?
No, these are white families.
Okay.
And I can't think of their name, but anyway, people that lived across the street from us, the Lewises. And you know, Becky, I guess, was the oldest. And we were just out in the yard across the street playing. Then we went in. Her family was doing something, I think, playing a board game. And I didn't tell my folks I was going over there. I was just over there.
Yeah.
Fess was looking everywhere. They had people out looking for me, you know. And I was just across the street. But we, as Bob said, we used to play together. I mean, there wasn't anything that a basketball game or a football game or a baseball game would break out, and nobody really thought anything about it. Like I said, I went to Dunbar. I never thought about why I didn't go to Jonesboro. It never.
It's just the way it is.
It's just the way it, you know, it is. And when we came home from school, like I said, there'd be a game somewhere. Somebody's doing something, and we never really thought about it. People used to come to the house. We'd be in the basement. There may be 2 or 3 black folks, and everybody else, it would be white kids over there. You know, they'd come over after the football game, spend the night, nobody said anything. You know, my parents just wanted to know who was down there in case somebody called.
Right.
Other than that, it didn't matter. You know, and we never thought about it. Then when we did integrate, it was no big deal. I mean, it was really no big deal. Now, and I can say this, my wife did the same thing in Nashville. And she would talk about how sometimes a riot would break out, or you'd have to watch yourself on this or do this. I'm like,
I don't know if any of you, I don't know if we talked about it before, but the session they did at the National Storytelling Festival this last time with the 5 girls that integrated the schools in New Orleans, and you know, you're talking about people who went through hell. There were 5 of them to begin with. Four of them were at the festival. That had.
I did not know that.
It was really a great session, and it was you know, and they talked about their story, but they went in 1st grade, and by the time that they were integrating this white school, and by the time there were 4 of them that ended up in that school, and then one of them went. I can't remember her name, but she has a national reputation and, you know, won these presidential awards. But it was really 5 of them, and when 4 of them went into this one school, by the end of the day, they were the only 4 kids in the school.
Yeah.
And they went to school for 1.5 years with nobody else but them going to that school. And they actually said, that was a really good time for them because, we learned a whole lot.
No hassle.
We didn't have any trouble. And then after the next, they ended up being, that school ended up, when the population came back, it was mostly a black school. And so they took those 4 girls and moved them to another school to integrate another school. And it was, they didn't leave, and they talked about their experience there, which was terrible, with people, people tearing their clothes and stuff like that, and it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, just to go to school.
How stupid human beings can be, and it makes me feel proud to be in a community that, has this history of people caring about each other, regardless of whether you're black, white, or whatever. The Latino community is there's lots of Latinos. The population within our city limits is like 1.6% or something like that. But with the immigration, the way it is, the discussions about immigration is so much harder to get connected, but their stories are, just as impactful in terms of things that they've gone through. And the I Am Home play, there was a small group of Latinos that talked about their stories, and they when Jules did the story circle with them, they indicated that to her that if it wasn't Jonesborough asking for it, they would have never done it. But they were involved in a march that came through Jonesborough that was only going to be like started out as 75 people and then maybe 100, and they might have 200. And I was town administrator time, and this has been a number of years ago, but I said, you can do that, but you have to stay on the sidewalk. You don't have to get a permit if you're not closing the streets. And when this is when George Bush was, and there's a big integration discussion, and controversy going on at that time. And they did this march in support of the positive things about immigration. And I was in town hall, and I heard this noise going on outside, and I looked out the window and I thought, hellfire. They weren't walking down the sidewalk. The whole Boone Street was filled with people, and and it was, I looked there, and they were way down there, and so I got the police department. They rushed downtown, and because there were something like 2,000 people. Wow. and Alma, who this was telling this story, was talking to them, and they were downtown, and people were cheering, and there were a couple of white women that yelled, "Go home, tomato pickers," or something like that, and her response, most everybody was clapping for him, that was on the sidewalk and stuff like that, and she's, when they yelled that, she thought to herself, I am home. This is my home, and with her telling that story, that became the actual title of the whole performance is "I Am Home." And, but it is, it's because of the way people view, especially the Mexicans in the area, or the way they feel like they're being viewed is, they're just really careful who they talk to.
Exactly.
And they have good reason to be.
Yeah.
And, so, that's talking about immigration, and, there was Ace Hardware, David Sell had his assistant manager, ended up not, worked for him for years and years and years. And somehow or another, he ended up being deported. And, people, wrote letters, and, he's in the community and all this kind of stuff. And they still made him go back to Mexico. But, my wife done a lot of traveling, and, she running a business, and in which you traveled and bought things. And then Mexico is just a wonderful country, and especially you get out of the border towns, and it's just wonderful, and the people are wonderful. They're religious, and they work hard, and they're family oriented, and they're exactly the way, you talk about people you want people to be. But it would take, if somebody had a job that's sitting here, it'd take, over 5 years to go through the system to get there. And that's one of the things we heard all the time is that, you do it the right way, and you're talking about 5 or 10 years down the road. So it's kind of crazy to me. But I think that it's still important. I think it's still something that we need to be doing is taking human to human. Everything's on the internet and all this kind of stuff, but it's human to human interaction that creates relationships, and I think that's something that is really important to me. And the McKinney Center mission is focused, on trying to enhance that in town, and not just in the McKinney Center, but any other things that the town does.
Folks, it is 8:11.
Wow.
How about it?
That's what
Exactly. This has been great. I think the stories, I don't want to wait once a year, Jules, to hear those stories, because they're amazing. And I think if somehow they can be accessible as story form, not, transcript wise, but a story. I am home.
There's different ways. And, one of the things that we're talking about is doing really good video recordings of them, because it needs to be, it deserves to have a really good record of them. And that also gives the McKinney Center a number of different ways in which they can use those.
Right.
And there's people back a long time ago, after we first got started with this, and working with kids in this, we had a lot of kids, and actually Jules and my daughter Jana was working with Community Performance at that time, and they did a program in the schools, and the kids, it's really impactful with the kids, and telling stories of their own family and stuff like that, or you're talking about, stories about things that were important to them personally and stuff. And so
one thing is, back to that, I see myself in the story.
So,
and we're good.
You validate people's lives when you tell their story.
Exactly.
It's like, it's important that you're here, and so I'm just a big advocate. I don't mean to go on about it, but it's something I think is really important. And I'm also, as we're ending this thing, I'm always proud to be with the McKinney. Ernest was he was one of my heroes. He was just a wonderful person.
I'm hoping, folks out there, you can still see us and hear us. Our screen, it looks like it's locked up, but we are. If you can still hear us, we're going to close off.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Any action items coming up? I think NAACP is having their Freedom Fund Bank Friday, November 16, 18, but next Friday. So if you want tickets, check
18th.
out. It's going to be the 18th. Check out NAACP Facebook webpage. Call me. And we want to say thank you to you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very
Thank you.
much.
Thank
Yes,
you
this has
for-
been great.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about this area that I did not
Mhm.
know. And that's great.
It's an interesting area, it really is.
Yeah, very different, very different. So you folks have a good one. Thank you.
Thank
Have a good night.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go practice singing.